just saying, so both things are synchronized. It's the audio, so they can be. There's a reason, I swear. Okay, is this thing on? Cool. So this is another fireside chat. Excited. So this is actually our third one. We have a couple more already scheduled going in the future. So we have Brad Kane. I screwed that up. Brad Kane. He's going to be here next month. So he runs the ERC, the local ISP. And so that's one of the things I really want out of these events is actually bringing in different types of technology people that you don't normally hear about. You always hear about the next Facebook or Meta or something. You never hear about the people running ISPs or MSPs or that type of thing. Yeah. Come on. So yeah, we have him next month, and then the month after that, we have the Y Combinator person. Unfortunately, I forget his name. And so basically, we're doing this every month, and again, the idea is to bring people in. And also, one of the things, you can grab anyone, see, is if you guys talk with each other, especially my students talking with other people in here, because one of the things I really want to do with these events is get people to better understand the technology community. Hey. One of the things I've noticed is I just went to an event yesterday that was full of people that are not here. Like it's really interesting. Asheville is such a small town, and yet the technology community is so fragmented. It's truly bizarre. So anyways, that's what we're trying to do here. Just so you guys know what's going on with Silicon Dojo. So we do classes basically every week. So right now we're doing our little AI series. Next week we're doing a class on scraping websites, actually using ChatGPT. That should be interesting. We are going to start doing weekend classes, just so you all know. In August, our first series is going to be Python and quote-unquote AI. What's that?
My apologies.
Oh. Okay, no worries. Do you know where you're looking for? Oh, okay. So basically, it's going to be a full weekend. So the first day on Saturday is going to have an introduction to Python in the morning, and then an introduction to ChatGPT API in the afternoon. And then the next day, it'll be introduction to Django in the morning, and then actually building a web app using ChatGPT in the afternoon. Basically, just trying to get people up to speed on using Python, Django, and ChatGPT. My hope is that'll help bring people in from areas that are farther away. So that's going on. Let's see here. And hopefully our fireside chats, just so you know, are going to be moving to the third Tuesday of every month. I actually have to talk to Brad about that. Right now we are competing with an AI meetup, and they have 55 people showing up. And you just can't compete with AI. So they're doing it the second Tuesday of every month. So we're going to switch over to the third Tuesday and see if we can get a few more people in here when we do that. And yeah, and so that's that. So if you'd like to come up. There you go. Man. Kemper Brown, CEO. Let me take off my obnoxious shirt here. Do you have any jokes to say?
I like the orange. I don't know why you're taking it off.
Well, because it makes it just draws the attention. You're the important one tonight, not me.
Well, I don't know about that, but we'll see.
Okay, Kemper Brown, you're right, you're CEO.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically, Kemper Brown is CEO of Electronic Office, which is a managed service provider company, right?
Yep, that's it. That's correct.
And make sure we put the microphone up like there we go.
We'll get this.
We'll get it.
I despise microphones. Normally I say nope. We got to do it for the YouTube audience.
YouTube. Yes. Okay, so when we talk about managed service provider, when we talk about Electronic Office, like what does your company then actually look like? What are we talking about?
So, in a nutshell, we run IT departments or help run IT departments for other businesses. The majority of our client base is located here in West North Carolina, but we also serve clients really across the state and some across the world. But sometimes we talk about, oftentimes, how many of us have worked for companies and organizations where we feel like the organization is moving faster than the technology. The technology is having trouble keeping up. And one of the things that we're able to do is we're actually able to help the technology keep up and be a driver for those businesses rather than a a boat anchor, to put it kindly.
So, like with your main business, is it maintenance contracts? Is it projects? Is it some of both?
Yeah, it's some of both. So we do a lot of services, a lot of maintenance. Sometimes a lot of that is proactive tasks that we do on an ongoing, recurring basis. Obviously, a lot of the work we do supports end users. So a user may call up and they can't print to their favorite printer, or they're not able to use the application in the way that they're supposed to be able to, and we can help them do that. We do a fair amount of project work, whether that's deploying new technologies, integrating technologies. We do a significant amount of cloud and Microsoft Azure. We have a pretty extensive Microsoft Azure practice. Hopefully, maybe that's something that we can get into and talk more about, because that's something that's pretty exciting that's going on. And we have a fair amount of experience and expertise in security. So we can also maybe talk a little bit about that, what that looks like.
So I guess with that, like with your tech stack, so are you more or less completely a Microsoft world? If somebody has like a Linux data center, are you excited about that?
We don't get very excited about Linux data centers or machines or things like that. Typically, we would recommend they migrate that to Microsoft unless there's a really, really, really good reason to keep it on Linux. We are very much, I would say, ingrained in the Microsoft stack. That's something that we've certainly made a conscious decision to hitch our wagon to that. We try and remain vendor agnostic, but certainly we have certain expertises that we lean on, and it's hard in our space. It's hard to be successful at what we do if we don't have that Microsoft expertise.
So what about Macs? So all of us cool coders like our Macs. Do you like Macs?
I love my iPhone. I can't imagine what life would be like without my iPhone. I do not have a MacBook or a Mac laptop. I think that certainly to me it's impossible in this day and age to have a Mac-free environment, whether that's iPhones, iPads. Certainly there are people who just love their MacBooks, but there are certain, I would say, like third rails and like Mac servers. Don't use a Mac server. But the nice thing is that with some amount of integration, you can have an environment that is a Windows-based server environment with Mac endpoints that can operate pretty smoothly. And certainly, I think there's really a place for Macs, particularly if you're doing more, some of what I think of as traditional strengths of Macs, design work, things like that.
So in your world, is Active Directory still important? And then like with Macs, can Macs talk to Active Directory at this point decently?
Yeah, so they can. I mean, that's kind of part of our job. Oftentimes, is if we have clients that really want Active Directory to interact with Macs. I would say that Active Directory is still incredibly important, and it's actually really cool. Some of the different advances that Microsoft is making in the Active Directory world, whether it's like an on-prem with a traditional domain controller, or even what's really more exciting is some of the things that are going on with Azure AD, Azure Active Directory.
And so with Active Directory, can you deal with iOS devices or Android devices at this point, or do you have to use something to deal with those?
It all depends on your security requirements. In terms of what level of access that you want to provide that. I would say kind of your top security level, you're probably not going to allow your iOS devices to have the same amount of connectivity, but it's not impossible if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, nothing's impossible. How much are you willing to pay for this? And then like with what you deploy, is everything going to Azure now? Like, what does your cloud environment look like for what you're selling to customers or maintaining for customers?
So I really I don't like the one size fits all approach, or the hey, I really want to move to the cloud. Why? Well, because I want to move to the cloud. Like that's a really bad reason. But I think that the advances that Microsoft is making in Azure and in that world make it more and more compelling. And it's actually a pretty exciting time to be looking at some of the capabilities of, IaaS for Azure, and as I said, Active Directory, some of the advanced security tools. So it's becoming more and more a better fit for, particularly I would say, kind of what I would call the SMB space, small and medium-sized businesses. Between I'll say like 25 and 100 seats. There's some really, really, really compelling reasons to move infrastructure to Azure.
And so when you're moving to the cloud, so are you going and using Azure services, or are you actually spinning up instances of Active Directory boxes up on their systems?
So I would say both. Yeah, both. Typically, again, what's really interesting is Microsoft is taking some of their more common, and I'm hoping this is making sense, but like taking some of their more common services. So we see it with like Microsoft 365, if y'all are familiar with basically their email tool. Like all Microsoft 365 is they took Exchange servers and they put them in their cloud, and they branded it and all that kind of stuff. With Azure AD, they're taking domain controllers, putting them into the cloud, and rather than building out a domain DC, putting it in an Azure server, you can get the same functionality by running the Azure AD solution set, for lack of a better word. On the other side is, yes, you can build out servers. So, for example, some of the more exciting projects that we've been doing is looking at applications that don't have a hosted option. And we have clients that say have a line of business application. They want to move it into Azure, but there's no traditional hosted route. And we can actually put that in Azure and turn that into a hosted, I put that in air quotes, hosted solution for them. And so some of that's pretty cool, particularly when you're looking at apps that don't have a traditional hosted model.
So are there any business cases for using something other than Azure? Is there a reason you go to AWS or even DigitalOcean sometimes, or always Azure, basically?
So for electronic office, for us, we don't have any business cases where we would use an AWS or what was the other one you said? I'm not even familiar with it.
DigitalOcean.
DigitalOcean, yeah, I'm sure, I probably should know what that is, but but some of that is, a lot of that is just our business model. For us to having too much focus in disparate products, it doesn't make as much sense. Like we want to be Azure experts, and we want to go really, really deep in that stack. That's an intentional business decision that we've made, and if people have questions, we can talk more about why we do that. But at least for our client base, and typically we focus on organizations that are between 25 and 500, I'll say, seats. In that case, we haven't come across an organization where it's like there's a specific business case for an AWS. In fact, what's really interesting is it's kind of the opposite, because how many organizations, unless you're running like a Linux application, most organizations are running their on-prem infrastructure using Microsoft Server on the Microsoft Server platform, and if they move it to Azure, the flexibility of either moving it to another hosted solution or moving it back on-prem, they get a lot of that flexibility, and they're not necessarily attaching themselves to like an AWS, where it can be a lot harder to get your data out.
And have you seen, like, it's kind of interesting how in 2023 people are still using so much Microsoft and Active Directory.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us, if I would have put a $100 bet, I would bet Microsoft would be sucking wind by now. Like
Microsoft is like, they're kind of a hip company these days.
Yeah, they're cool.
I mean, they've really, 10 years ago, they were floundering.
Yeah.
And really only surviving based on the market share that they had built up over the previous 30 years. But fast forward 10 years, they have done an incredible job at not only getting back up to speed with technology trends, but also back to kind of I would say a leader in terms of where the space is going.
But do you see any competition within their world? I mean, like, I know if you want to go to Google email services, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, again, when you start talking about Active Directory, when you talk about like an enterprise world with everything being connected with security services, is there anything out there that's competitive to it?
Not from my perspective. I mean, no. There's just I'm sure there's niche products out there that say, oh, I can do this really, really well. Like, okay. I don't even know what that product would be, but no, I mean, it's also, Microsoft is I think at their stage where if you've got a company that is trying to build out similar services, why would you want to compete against Microsoft? Why are you going to think that you can do something better, faster, cheaper than they can, and now more secure? Actually, what's really fascinating is that kind of under the radar, Microsoft has become one of the top security companies in the world. Some of that is because of the traffic that they're able to see with all of, with all of their infrastructure in terms of Azure, the IaaS infrastructure, Azure AD, Microsoft 365. They're able to see so much traffic that they're actually really on the forefront at times of discovering some of the latest vulnerabilities.
And then, so what hardware are you putting this on? Are you a Dell shop or a Lenovo shop, or do you care, whatever's cheapest?
That's where we even get more agnostic in terms of who kind of our favorite hardware vendors are. For electronic office, we're a Lenovo shop, and really the only thing that means is that we maintain a warranty certification, so we're certified Lenovo Warranty Center, and that means that we can do warranty repair for Lenovo, and we don't have to ship it off. But if somebody comes in, I remember dealing with a client, I don't know, this is 7 years ago, and they were convinced that like the Chinese were in Lenovo's back pocket, and so they only wanted to use Dell. And we're like, okay, fine, like that's no big deal. But if we have a choice, we say use Lenovo, because if it breaks, we can fix it and turn it around in 24 hours. Otherwise, we got to ship it out. So,
is there a reason you went with Lenovo over Dell with that kind of relationship?
Well, that goes back to being a company with a 40-year history, and we were very much ingrained in the IBM world. And obviously, Lenovo bought the hardware piece from IBM, and so that was just based on an earlier relationship that evolved. And I mean, the manufacturers don't like hearing this, but it's all made with the same components. So it's like, I mean, it's really, again, it's Lenovo, but I will say, so like I use a Lenovo laptop. I've used Lenovo laptops for the last 20 years, and they're bulletproof. I can count on less than one hand how many actual like hardware issues I've had, thrown it around, abused the hell out of it, and they're really pretty much bulletproof. So that's but you're gonna get, people are gonna say that everyone has kind of their favorite, and really at this point they're pretty much all the same.
Fair enough. And then for networking, because you guys do networking too, right? Switches and routers and all that?
Absolutely.
So who's your preferred vendor for that?
So on the firewall side, we really like SonicWall. A lot of that has to do with their manageability. So, when we look at networking, a piece of networking equipment, like you can buy the most expensive Palo Alto firewall with all the bells and whistles, and if you don't know how to set it up right or actually use it, it's much less secure than any other device. So we do partner with SonicWall. That's a big time partnership for us. Really like the manageability of those. And then on the switching side, we typically like Aruba. Yeah.
What's good about Aruba?
Well, again, it's the manageability. I think for our clients in kind of that 25 to 500 seat space, it's a great product in terms of giving the functionality that clients like those size need at the price point. We still every once in a while, it used to be that Cisco was the gold standard. This is probably like boring people but used to be Cisco used to be the gold standard, and there would be people that would you call you up and they say, I only want to see quotes with Cisco devices, and so okay, fine, that's okay. But I think that Aruba, which used to be HP, HP bought Aruba, and then they started putting the Aruba sticker on their networking equipment. They've really come. I mean, we've kind of watched that wave grow. I remember working. We had one client. We were all Cisco switches. We had one client that discovered the HP. They really liked the price point, and we started using it. And it kind of opened our eyes that they really had something. They really made some advancements here, and we've sort of watched that grow. And they've done a really good job of refining their product, and they've kept the price point at a place where it's appealing. And again, Cisco's a great product. It's probably still the leader, but when you're looking at that size organization with looking at the price point that those organizations need to be at, Aruba is a really great value.
Is it a GUI interface? Because that's one of the problems when you get to networking equipment is getting your employees up to speed.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So how hard is it to train an employee on Aruba versus a Cisco?
I don't think there's a huge difference. It's really just a comfort factor. Now, Cisco, one of the things that Cisco was one of the early companies from my perspective. Steve may tell me that I'm wrong here, but they were one of the first to really push their certifications in their training. And so you still see people that when they go out and they want a networking certification, they get the Cisco certification because that's like the gold standard. But really it comes down to what you use, what you're comfortable with, what you're using every day and what you're used to. Again, so much of the technology these days, the differentiator is how you're able to use it. A lot of the technology can all do the same stuff, but if you don't know what you're doing on one stack versus you do know another stack, go with what you know. That's going to be a much better solution for what you're doing with your clients or whatever it may be.
So then with your employees, so how many employees do you guys have?
We're right around 40.
You're around 40.
Yeah.
Are they all here? Are they remote? Or
so that's a good question. So we have what I would call a hybrid workforce, so a combination of remote and ones that are in the office. I'm trying to think. As of today, all but one are in Western North Carolina. We do have no, that's not true. I got to go through. So we have a couple that are outside the Western North Carolina region, outside our region, for different reasons. But I think for us, it's with the pandemic, we've gotten pretty good at kind of that hybrid workforce. But it still helps to start them out and do the kind of their initial onboarding in our office, because there's a cultural piece that we haven't quite gotten. I'll say we haven't refined in terms of getting people onboarded without them kind of being there to absorb the initial culture.
So with your company, I mean, could you go 100% remote? Because it's interesting with IT now.
Yeah.
So I remember IT back with something called Server Management Service in 2000, and it was brutal.
Yeah.
So literally hopping on an airplane was faster than using remote.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But now with Azure and all that, could you actually do IT support all remote if you really wanted to?
Sure. We have a client that is they have 7 locations. They're all in Arizona, and we support them 100% remotely. I'm still the only person that's actually ever been to their locations, and yeah, and it's worked beautifully. They're one of our kind of bellwether clients.
So with 40 employees then, so like what does the breakdown look like? Like how many sales-ish, how many salespeople, how many senior levels? Like, what does that kind of look like with your employees?
So we're, as you may expect, the vast majority of our team is our technical resources, somewhere a little north of 75%, or probably right around 75%. And then we have, I would say five on our leadership team, and then a couple admin folks, and we have, I guess, three on our, what I would say is sales/account advisor team. That's kind of our breakdown.
So do you hire, like back in the day, 20 years ago, you'd say, I have so many MCSEs and CCNPs.
Yeah.
I think MCSE actually got retired at this point. Like, what are your technical people?
It did, and Microsoft, if you ever want something to like make your head spin, try keeping up with the Microsoft certifications and all the different tests and things like that you need. It's just like a carousel. So we still look for certs. I mean, there are certain things that having certifications, I think, still bring value. I think it still can deliver a baseline or demonstrate a baseline of certain knowledge, whether it be like a Microsoft cert, even a Cisco cert. I was talking about it a little earlier. Like if you understand networking to the level where you can go out and get a Cisco cert, I have a high level of confidence that that we can train you up on the Aruba stack, something like that. But I would also caution that we all know people that go out and get a bunch of certs, but then you actually put them in front of an issue or ask them to troubleshoot, and they're like a fish out of water. So some of the sharpest minds, technology minds that I've met, it's like this person is not going to be any more or less sharp by going out and getting a cert. So there's a balance there, but as a rule, I'm a big fan of certs.
So what, other than like Cisco, like what cert is, like if you saw, like what's a valuable cert to you at this point? You're like, oh, I like that.
Yeah, so like for example, and we've talked about it a lot, like Microsoft has a whole line of certs around Azure. Some going out and getting some of those Azure certs for us really sets you up well and sets you up for success. If I see someone with I think one of them is Azure Administrator. And it's, to see somebody who has that. And it's actually, it used to be the MCSE, I think, required something like 4 or 5 different exams to get, was it 7? Anyway, but some of the Azure ones are 1, 2, 3 exams. So they just kind of condense that, and so it's easier to get some of those certs.
And so, like, if somebody came to you, like when I started in IT, it was stupid, but you could like literally go to an MCSE boot camp and get a pretty darn good job coming out. Like, could a 19-year-old get an Azure cert and actually get hired as something decent with you guys?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, we're now again. There's a space there that's you have to understand. Just having the cert doesn't mean that you can actually fix something or troubleshoot something. So having an aptitude for troubleshooting, having an aptitude where you're not just learning to the test, but you actually understand the material, that's really, really important. We still like to see, if you're 19 years old, I think it's still, I'm a big fan of some of the AV Tech education programs. And so, going through an AV Tech type program, doing a 4-year degree, I think there's still value to that. It's not a requirement, but I think if you can combine some education background with a cert, I think that combination is probably a little stronger.
Interesting. And then with your clients, you have one in Arizona.
Yeah.
And then I look at your webpage and you say Europe. Like, why is somebody coming all the way to Asheville to get support in Europe? Like, is there something valuable about you? Is it a relationship? How do you get those customers?
So we used to have. I'm gonna answer this by telling a story. We used to have kind of an unofficial rule that we wanted all of our clients headquartered here in Western North Carolina, and that way that, if something really hit the fan, we could get in front of the real decision makers and be able to respond quickly and make decisions quickly. And also, I think that a lot of times there isn't a replacement for actually getting together and meeting in person. As technology has allowed us to spread our wings, we have clients that may have a presence here in Western North Carolina, but if they have a significant presence elsewhere, we can still work with them and deliver solutions. What's also really fascinating to me is that with the pandemic, folks are so much more confident, or comfortable, I should say, conducting business over Teams, over Zoom, whatever it may be. And so, whereas before maybe the technology supported things, you didn't always have a comfort level on the client side, and now there's that comfort level. So that's this little kind of an interesting twist in all of this. But directly to you're talking about we do have a couple of clients that have presence in Europe, and it's really customizing our solutions, tailoring our solutions around what that support looks like, what they need, and I'm pretty proud of what some of the work we've done. We've actually done projects and operations where we've flown people in. One of our clients has a location that's actually inside the Arctic Circle, and it's a very remote area, and it's a couple of flights and a bus ride, and you're staying in this little village that has one grocery store, which is also the only pub / place to eat. And you fly in and you've got a very exact timeline and the work that has to get done, and all the equipment is programmed and waiting for you, and you get in and get out.
So especially with the Europe folks and the EU rules and regulations,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make sure you're not doing something stupid and get fined or whatever? Is it?
Good collaboration with our clients. There's not like a magic answer to that question, but you have to know the rules and regulations. You have to have good collaboration with your clients. And between the two of you, you work together and figure it out. I mean, GDPR is the primary. That's the good thing about GDPR is there are significant resources, out there to help companies like ours navigate it. If you're working with companies that have, the thing about GDPR is that companies in Europe, it's a much bigger concern for them than it is us, and so. We just are very, very attuned to it, and we work together with them to make sure that we're not, touching any third rails.
Okay. And then, so when we're talking about electronic office, what kind of business is this? So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this was started by your father, right?
Yes.
And so obviously it's a corporation. But do you really have investors, or is it mainly like a family corporation at this point? What is the?
No, we're still 100% wholly. I'll say family owned.
And then for you,
should we get? You want to go?
Well, if you want to go farther, yeah, we'll take
I
all
don't know.
the
I don't know what follow. What follow-up questions? So I'll just give the short story. So, 42 years ago, my father moved to Asheville. Asheville was a much different place back then, and started a company it was basically slinging hardware, selling what then were called microcomputers, and some of the early early IBM computers, early Apple computers, programs like Apple Education, which were some really interesting programs that Apple had around education and providing schools with Apple products. That's one of the ways that Apple actually got involved in the education space very early. It's also another reason why you still see a lot of Apple in education spaces. And, fast forward 40 years, we've kind of evolved with the times. Obviously, with, Best Buys and Circuit Cities, the hardware game kind of dried up and disappeared, and so it moved more into the services and consulting and kind of that area, and that's kind of how we moved into the MSP space, and that's kind of how it evolved.
Interesting. Good deal. Okay, so I think that's probably the first part. So normally when we do these little interviews, these chats,
Yeah.
we do the first part, basically where we're at now.
Yeah.
Then we'll do how you got there.
Okay, so
we'll
I got ahead of the curve a little bit.
So, Alex, you got your thing. So does anybody have any questions currently on what we've talked about so far?
Steve? No, give me a hard question.
I can't.
I mean, you can, I'll just not answer it.
I think there's we know each other, and I know some of the history. And as you started talking about the origin and the start of your company, I think for our audience, it's really important to know about the funding mechanism for your company and your personal theories and functionality there. Because I spoke with you, and it was endearing to me, and I think the rest of our audience would love to hear that too.
Okay. So, let's see. So first of all, we're a little bit unique in that we're a debt-free company. We're very proud to be a debt-free company, and something that we work very hard about, and we talk really openly, because one of the things that's very important to us is our independence. And what I mean by that is to not be beholden to investors, or not to feel like we're in a space where we have to go and find somebody to invest in us to maintain our relevance. And so by staying debt-free, it gives us that flexibility to do all those things, to reinvest in our company, to make sure that we're investing in Asheville. Asheville's still our hometown. I get a lot of pride that we can go outside of Asheville and find clients and do business outside of Asheville, but at the end of the day, we're bringing it back home. So that's something that's really, really interesting to me. And it actually is, you have companies that for a long time, going back in terms of our history, a lot of our work for the first, I'll say 20 years, 1981 to say 2001, it was a lot of hardware, it was a lot of project-based. A lot of times that means you go out, you find a project, you do the project, you bill for the project, you bring the money back in, and then you go and find another project. And so it's kind of this, you kind of have that cycle. Now for us, the majority of our revenue comes in through a recurring basis. And so we actually had to, from a business model, we had to evolve from getting those big windfalls and having big projects close, to having more having recurring revenue but less revenue. And so where it's more consistent, but it's smaller amounts. And so understanding what that looks like from a cash flow perspective and that evolution. Now, fortunately for us, that evolution started 22 years ago. It's interesting, at some point there's a study, how much 9/11 actually changed. We all know about, the 9/11 from the actual event, but in terms of its impact on technology, and understanding that you had all of these systems that were very, very reliant, or I should say DR systems that were in place and people knew were important, but hadn't really been tested until we had a big event like 9/11. So 9/11 actually changed a lot of how we look at technology and business continuity, disaster recovery, and things like that. And so moving to that, it just changed, it just evolved the business model. And what's really interesting is that's when really things became a lot more interesting. Looking back on, selling hardware, it was a great business model. It worked, but you weren't able to have the kind of impact on an organization by just selling them a piece of equipment as we do now, where we're actually able to really be in the trenches with them and helping them grow their business. Again, we want technology to be a driver for their business, not not something that's holding them back. Did I do a good job? Did I?
Yeah.
Any other questions? I love those kind of questions, by the way. So fun fact, I'm not a technology guy. I'm not a technologist. I actually have a degree in chemistry and had a past career. And when I left Asheville to go away to school, I thought this was a really nice place. Would be a really nice place to come back for holidays and things like that. But I never thought I would come back. And it's really, really fascinating how much as technology has gotten more interesting, Asheville got more interesting, and there's that kind of connection is really, really, it's fascinating, and I think it's made Asheville. I could never have dreamed of Asheville being what it is now today. Looking back, growing up here, and so it's just been really neat to see.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll go to the before times.
Okay.
All right, and we got to do this like an ice cream cone, so I'm not spending 5 hours cleaning up the audio. Yeah. Oh, it does. It does sound good. Okay, just got to make sure. Okay, so your father, he moved to Asheville
Yes.
in like 1980.
Not yet. Moved in 1981 and it's like funny to think about now, but the dream was to bring the microcomputer to Western North Carolina.
That was actually his that was his plan.
Yes, that was the dream.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of funny to think about.
Well, no, because what I think about now is, my wife and I have been coming to Asheville for like 15 years, and I remember what it was like 15 years ago, which is not. But in 1980, apparently this place was pretty impoverished.
Well, particularly downtown. Where we are now it was not an area you would want to go to at night, but. There was a point, and there was a really, really interesting. If anybody wants to go down the rabbit hole of Asheville and West North Carolina, actually right around I think it was right around 1980, 1981, there was a plan to basically level. That was where the rise of shopping malls at that point, and so much of Asheville was boarded up. It was just empty. Some of that dates back to the Depression because Asheville did something that almost none other municipalities in the country did, was that they decided instead of defaulting on their notes, they decided they were going to pay it back. And so for a long time in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the largest budget item on Asheville's P&L on their financials was paying back debt. And so because of that, they couldn't invest in, downtown revitalizations and things like that, new buildings. And so basically they had all these old buildings boarded up. And there was a plan where they were going to level a vast majority of downtown Asheville and build a shopping mall. And there was a group of concerned citizens actually led by a group of women. And what they did on a Saturday, and by the way, sort of past this, it had to go before a vote in the city. And so what this group did with incredible foresight is they took a bunch of bandanas and they tied it together and they tied it all around the area that was going to be bulldozed. And they stood there on a weekend and people walked by and they showed people, here's what's going to be bulldozed. And people could actually see how much of downtown was just going to be leveled. And it didn't pass. They didn't end up bulldozing downtown. Thank God. And what ended up happening, and really nothing happened then for another, 20 years. But it's really saved downtown and what has allowed downtown to now become where it is, where you now have money coming in, and some of it is from, people like Julian Price, Public Works Projects. Is anybody familiar with Public Works Projects? If you aren't, you shouldn't be. Again, you should be. Organizations that have done a lot to make downtown Asheville what it is. And so I don't know, that was a rabbit hole, but really interesting. To me, it's really interesting in terms of how Asheville got to where it is today.
But like with your father, did he have a connection here? Or like,
No.
He just.
He was from New Orleans, and he wanted to go and do his own thing, and so that was this was the place, for him to have do his dream.
And then, so doing this, especially with microcomputers, because a lot of people, like a lot of like my followers asked me, it's like, oh, did you do computers when you were a kid? And I'm like, yeah, it was DOS when I was a kid. Like, so, and again, like you go back to 1980, you talk about microcomputers in 1980,
Yeah.
like it's nothing to do with what we got today.
No.
So what got him interested in them? And was he an engineer? Was he like, how was he interested in this back then?
He just had what then you would think of as a techie mind. He's always been able to, he's still alive, but he's always been able to fix just about anything. And so this was before, there were no degrees in computer science at that point. He just had a knack for it. But he did, and actually what's interesting is, and I think part of, he would attribute and does attribute a lot of his success was that he actually had a business background. And so he came into the technology world understanding the technology, but also understanding how to make the numbers work. And from his perspective, a lot of technology companies, particularly, I still think technology companies struggle with this, but when he was really building the business, a lot of technology companies, they understood the technology, but they didn't understand how to run the business. And he understood how to run the business. He understood how to make the numbers work, and that's part of why we're still in business today.
So was he able to grow it just off of profit? Did he take debt back then? Or?
I think he had a $5,000 loan from his brother.
Wow, that's it.
But and sharing a lot that'll go on YouTube. But you also have to remember. So there was some hyperinflation in that time, and so he had been living in Atlanta. He had bought a house, and the house value had gone up substantially. And so he also he sold his house at the time and took that equity and put it into the business. So along with a small family loan. So anyway.
Just out of curiosity, so in all the time, so in 40 years, has there been ever a time with electronic office? It's like, if only we had done this in Atlanta, it would be so much farther.
Well, I think, I think that actually being in Asheville, we've been able to use that as an advantage because we can go and we can see what's going on in the Atlantas and say, okay, this is where things are going, and be able to bring it back to Asheville, in a time when we're really able to capitalize on it. So in some ways, I think yes, maybe, but also, and this is just personality of my father, that he had the personality that he would rather succeed in a place like Asheville than be. Before he started Electronic Office, he worked for Georgia Power, which is a large utility company in Georgia, and they still exist. I think they now call it Southern Company, but so he saw what that world was like, and I think he made the intentional decision that he would rather do what he wanted to do in a place like Asheville than a place like Atlanta.
Fair enough. And so you came on as CEO 10-ish years ago, is that the deal?
I joined the business 12 years ago. It'll be 12 years ago this summer. CEO sometime 4 or 5 years ago. We actually I joked with my dad, we don't actually remember when. We don't exactly remember when that event happened, but which is actually, I think, probably a sign of a good succession plan. It's sort of like it happens, and it's like, wait, this wasn't already working like this, but yeah, it was an evolution. I didn't just come back to Asheville, and it's like, you're CEO. It didn't work like that.
And so, like, what was his decision? Like, how old is he approximately?
He's in his late 60s. I'll save him from putting his age out on YouTube. That's probably a security risk.
Wow. Well, no, but actually that's relatively young. So especially with somebody that built up this corporation for 30 years, like just a little bit, you don't have to go. Like, was there a decision point for him to step down? Because that's the thing. A lot of times, I mean, you build this thing, it's hard to walk away and give it to anybody.
Oh, I mean, my goodness. Patriarchs of businesses are notoriously bad at letting go. I mean, you hear stories. There's a business in Asheville, and like the guy worked all the way up until like his final days with a cancer diagnosis, and you would drive by the office and you would see his car in the parking lot, and like that's just not a. So patriarchs of businesses notoriously have a problem letting go. I was blessed that I did not have that problem, but it wasn't something. I think when it comes to succession, and succession is very important with business, not just family business, but any business. And so it's important that it happens organically. I've heard people say that like the slower a transition happens, the better. And again, you also, it is better to, when you have situations like, hey, this person is stepping into this role, and it's kind of people look around and say, wait, I thought they were already doing that. I mean, that's a sign of a strong succession plan, particularly with family businesses there. So I think that if anything, that I was very blessed to be in a situation where he released control, at the speed that he did, and it wasn't something where it was like throw you in the deep end. I mean, it really was an evolution. And I say sometimes that when it comes to coming back into a family business, you learn pretty quickly that, and you just sort of have to get comfortable with. There are times when you have very little control over your own success, and that's kind of a weird place to be in, but as that evolves, you learn, and you're able to navigate that and still be successful and sort of find your way.
And so you came back 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think you're younger than me, so you're
Well, probably a little bit.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily that old to be coming back to, because you wanted to get rid of away from Asheville.
Yes.
And
yes.
So is Asheville so much better? Was out there so much worse? Like, what got you to want to come back to Asheville then?
Well, again, I mean, when I left, so I'm in my late 30s. I left Asheville in 2004, and when I left, there was very little for young people to do. That's just kind of the way it was. I joke that a lot of my memories of downtown was it was boarded up. Tumbleweeds going down Boomer Avenue. Lexington Avenue was a really bad place to roll your windows down and ask for directions. There just wasn't a lot for young people. But in the 7 years that I was gone, you had things like, beer became increasingly more interested. There's more things for young people. It kind of grew into this kind of foodie town. And so it started to get more exciting. The technology world and the business also got more and more exciting. And so, and my dad and I basically, when I was living in Chapel Hill, working in Research Triangle Park, and I was working in drug development, and I had a 30-minute commute. And so pretty much every day during my 30-minute commute, at 5 o'clock, I would call my dad. And so we basically took a year and hatched the plan out for me to come back over the course of a year. It wasn't something that just, snapped your fingers. It was kind of building to this, and that was intentional. I didn't, when I moved back, everyone sort of said, "Oh, you're coming to take over the business," and I would always kind of bristle at that because that wasn't the way I was looking at it. But because you gotta want it. Like, you can't. The road is littered with people who join family businesses out of obligation, and typically those stories end really, really poorly. And so I wasn't coming back with any preconceived notions, but I also wasn't coming back just to hang out for 4 or 5 years and go and do something else. And so, thank goodness that it's kind of worked out and been able to find my place and also be something that I've really been able to enjoy.
And so you were in drug development then. So I guess that's one of the interesting questions, because you hear so much about technology that you got to be passionate or whatever about this stuff. Like, what is running electronic office actually that much different than drug development? Did you dislike drug development? Like, what was that transition?
Yeah, so I studied chemistry in college, and what I realized, and I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed working in drug development and my role there. For me, in that world, there is very much, I would joke that there is a concrete ceiling in that world unless you want to go get a PhD. And I decided that was not the route that I wanted to take. I did not love it enough to go get a PhD. I also realized that even being in that very analytical world of chemistry and drug development, and don't get me wrong, I actually really enjoyed my time in that world and have a lot of really good stories. But I realized that I was much more interested in the business aspect of that. And in terms of like being in that kind of business, there certainly are similarities in terms of just the way the business works. And also, chemistry is a very analytical science, and there are similarities and lessons that can be applied in terms of the analytics of science to the analytics of business.
So one of the big things in the technology world is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like everybody gets imposter syndrome. So you come from the pharma world, and your father's owner of the company, which apparently the Gen Zers being a Nepo baby is one of the worst things.
Yeah.
So you've got all this crap like exponential. Did you notice that, or how did you deal with it? Like, do you ever wake up in the morning and wonder, should you be CEO of this company? Like, how do you deal with that?
One foot in front of the other. I think self-doubt is part of what makes us human. If we don't feel self-doubt, then I think it's that's a great way to be overconfident or cocky or things like that. But I mean, really, it's just you just got to keep going. Something that I'm a big fan of is like when something happens good, like take a second and mark the moment and be like, hey, like this isn't all shit. Hey, listen, today, let's mark the moment that this worked the way it's supposed to, and this went the way we wanted it to. So I think that if you do that and you do just just keep going, I think that's the best. Easier said than done. Yeah, I think that's what I leaned on for myself.
With 40, I don't know how many employees you had back then, but with enough employees, were there any internal issues with that? Was there any was there anybody else up for a promotion or whatever, or like any of that kind of stuff?
Not really, but again, that goes back to coming into the business and not immediately, coming in and not being like anointed, it's that evolution. I'm a big fan of, so I study a lot of family businesses and I talk to a lot of family businesses, and one of them I think is a great example is Tabasco, the McElhaney family, and the way they operate is they have a very small number of the vast majority of the shareholders are not involved in the active business. They have a very small number of family members that they bring in, and those family members, they have to have the chops and the skills to raise to the level of being CEO. And if at any point you get to a point where you level out and you're not able to jump to that next level, you're out. And that's understood on the front end, because they don't want family members in middle manager positions. the idea is that if you're a family member and that you're a shareholder, that you need to be able to have the chops to be top. And if you're not, like, that's okay. You still get to be a shareholder. You don't lose your family interest. It's still part of your family identity. You're just not able to work in the business anymore. And so I think that's a really good model in terms of avoiding those kind of issues. And so I think that was helpful in terms of just always being able to, always making that transition, and then just one foot in front of the other. I mean, that's kind of the way it works.
Yeah, fair enough. So, like, been around 40 years. Like, what's the longest term employee you have? Do you have people that come to work for you for an entire career, or?
Our COO, Matt Shea, he's been with us now 25 years. And so he's, at this point, he's our longest tenured team member, and kind of really risen the ranks, and is really a critical part of our organization, and he's on our advisory board and all that kind of stuff. So I would say he's the poster child for longevity and what a career at Electronic Office looks like.
So what about, like, with your tech employees though?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how long do they stick around for?
I would say it varies. I mean, in 2023, it's I would say that the employment world is much different than it was 5 years ago. Much less 15 years ago. I think I calculated it out recently. I think our average is somewhere around 8 years. So, I don't know what other companies are at, so I don't have any like metrics to compare that to, but to me that sounds pretty good. So it's important, it's important for us. There's a lot of burnout in technology. And so, and also, the nature of technology always changing, always transitioning. There's a piece of that where it's kind of, you sometimes are always kind of looking to what's next, and so you have to be able to provide opportunities for growth and things like that, and we try our best to try and do that.
Fair enough. And the final question for the before times. So with being in Asheville, like, with politics, and not one side or the other, but like when you think about taxes, when you think about regulations, now obviously your father came here and you wanted to come here. Up until now, has there been any policies that have actually been beneficial to you? Because you hear the politicians come out, and every 4 years they talk about small business people, and then they get elected and they forget about us. Like, has there actually been policies here that have been valuable for you?
So first, let's do a shout out. I don't know if anybody saw, but this morning, state of North Carolina was #1 in the nation for business. Based on a CNBC study, and it's the second year in a row. And so, North Carolina is not perfect, but I think North Carolina does a pretty damn good job at embracing businesses of all sizes, combining that with strong education, strong schools, not only in the K-12 space, but also in the universities. And so I think that combination is pretty special. And so, for the most part, also, I've only lived in one state in my life. I will pretty much, not resigned, but I will only live in one state in my life, and I'm pretty proud of that. So I'm very much a proud North Carolinian. I went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Like, it's I'm, as they say, I'm born and bred. But I think North Carolina has a pretty good thing going. Is it perfect? Well, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And I think Asheville, for the most part, is a pretty darn good place to do business. I mean, yes, we've got things that we can do better. We've got to figure out some of the housing stuff. We've got some geographic challenges in Asheville that make it more difficult, and we've got to figure out some things there. But for the most part, I think Asheville's a great place to do business. I used to, when I moved here 12 years ago, which isn't that long ago, but in terms of technology and some of the remote work trends, it's like a lifetime ago. And I remember kind of getting here and thinking like, there's kind of a chicken and the egg issue, because I knew people that wanted to get to Asheville, but there weren't necessarily like the jobs in Asheville to support that. And now the number of people you're seeing that are able to move to Asheville, work remotely, bringing their own job, BYOJ, is pretty neat to see, and I think does speak to the environment to do business in Asheville.
Cool. Okay, so that's the middle part. That's the before times. Anybody have any questions? Okay, well, Steve.
Somebody other than Steve had. Surely I've said something too. Surely I've said something where you guys just totally disagree with.
Never really good question this time. You can give it last.
One of the places I worked before, is kind of the chief engineer, the chief software engineer, basically the chief engineer of we're installing a new robotic cells with many parts going on, and the chief engineer left about 2 months before I was there, and most of the new software engineers are very new, and they have a brand new software, and they have basically it's new. So I kind of want when I met with the IT or software engineer, they did not seem to understand much of what's going on since the technology is so very new. And I just want to know, have your company dealt with something that you never dealt before, completely brand? Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, when we have a new piece of technology, we always test it on ourselves first. So we're kind of our own guinea pig. Sometimes you hear like, oh, we eat our own dog food, which just to me is a horrible thing. I just hate that analogy that you hear people use sometimes. But so yeah, I mean, we use it on ourselves, but and then we try and be very programmatic in terms of rollouts and things like that. But also, like, I think in terms of deploying new technologies, becoming familiar with new technologies, also that's part of when we think about who we want to hire. We hire for people that they embrace that, and so I think that's really an important aspect of it too. Does that kind of answer your question?
How do you look for new business?
Okay. So a lot of our new business comes from referrals. We do a lot of partnering with organizations, whether it be with like for right now, we have a kind of a neat partnership we're working on with an application development company in Greensboro. So those kind of partnerships are important to us, and then also just our brand, and our brand is an important part of who we are, and attracting the right kind of clients to us. So doing events like this and that kind of thing.
Oh, no, Hong wasn't finished yet.
What I want to understand is how so has the client has a brand new technology that they basically struggle because of one of their key members, or somebody has to leave or gone bust, whatever, and they bring this to you. Has that occasion ever happened, or do you bring the technology to the client?
Yeah. So what that looks like for us when it works well is us coming in and really understanding the business. So for us, it's not just about the technology. It's also the application of the technology with the business. And so in that case, it really has to be, we joke and say that it has to be a team sport. You have to work together. It can't just be one side. It can't be electronic office pushing things down the client's throat, or us sitting back and waiting for the client to have all the good ideas. It's really very collaborative, and I think that getting that piece right is so critical when you're working with a company like ours, and understanding the collaborative nature of what that looks like and what it takes to make technology successful. Yes, we have to be able to support the technology. Like that's kind of a baseline. But past that, let's collaborate and work on and finding the best technology solutions, for our clients. We also work really well, when it comes to technology. A lot of times, when people say technology, a lot of times they're thinking about the application layer, which is king. The application is king. But if your networking layer and your infrastructure layer aren't solid, it doesn't matter how great the application layer is, you're destined to fail. And so making sure that we're focused on all three layers of the technology stack is really, really important.
First,
Yes.
in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I worked for a pet food manufacturing company, and I, in fact, ate my own dog. My question is, as you were transitioning into your role as CEO, were there specific culture changes that you wanted to implement, or you felt that you wanted to implement as you were taking the reins?
Then I would say no. It was it was kind of a mantra of like, don't screw it up, because there was a lot we were doing right. Now for me, it's a lot about I think a lot about keeping ourselves relevant and like what that means. I mean, there are pieces of there are parts of our culture, our professionalism, always doing what we say we're going to do. Things like that that are ingrained in our culture, and part of why we've been able to be successful for 40 years. Finding best of breed tools, bringing best of breed technologies to our clients, communicating well with our clients. Those kind of things are ingrained in our culture. Those things won't change. But there are little tweaks along the way that I think we have made and will continue to make to keep ourselves relevant.
Are there times that you've found that a customer or a potential customer is not a good fit, and you make that decision? And if so, what makes you come to that decision?
Yes, and those decisions are brutal. Those decisions can be really, really, really difficult. At the end of the day, it really comes down to that partnership and the lines of communication. And if a client is not invested in being successful with us, like we can do everything right, and we can put all of the time and effort and energy and everything in making it successful. And if the client is not also invested, it can create it just doesn't work. It's got to be collaborative. And so yes, we've had times where, for whatever reason, a client isn't invested, or we've dealt with difficult personalities and things like that, where it's just not a good fit, and we have to make the decisions to move on. That being said, I mean, we also know where we are. Like we're the service provider, and so we're working with clients. Client is king, so to speak, and so we keep that in mind. But yes, certainly we get to, and I think that it's really difficult to get to this point, but a lot of times in service-based businesses, sometimes having a difficult client can actually bring down your team. And so really being in touch with, what your team is going through and what that experience is like, and you have to balance that revenue, that business, that relationship with, what it's actually like to work with them and whether it's a good fit, because that can really be, sometimes you can have a client and it can actually have a negative impact on your organization, your team, your internal organization. So we have to be mindful of that. But yeah, the answer to your question is yes.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent, cool. All right, so I know that in Asheville we have like a growing number, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, of like remote tech workers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any particular industry in tech coming here first? I know that like we have like a fair amount of like manufacturers, like GE Aviation or even like Moog, manufacturing like synthesizers, and there's like pieces of like electronics or like hardware in tech. But do you see like any like software companies or like other industries coming here? And if so, which ones do you see and when?
Oh man,
That's a big question, sorry.
That's a really good question. So I split that up into a couple, basically two pieces. So some of you guys may know you drive an hour and 15 minutes outside of Asheville, and you encounter, Facebook's got a massive data center. Google has a massive data center. Organizations are finding their way to North Carolina and Western North Carolina. I think that's already happening. You mentioned some of the other larger organizations that are moving here. All of those organizations need folks that are in technology. The industry jobs are important, but the technology still has to be there to support that, and so that's an important component of that. But also with the growth of remote work, I think with some of the growth of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Asheville, you've got kind of that other piece of it, which is, I think, really it's been interesting to track and watch that, and that's exciting. So I don't know what's next. If I did, that would be really cool. But I know, here's what I know. I know that technology is only becoming more complex. I know that technology is only becoming more important to organizations. And so as organizations grow in North Carolina, and as North Carolina continues to be a desirable place for business, there's going to be a need for the technology that drives those businesses, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in something like software development or healthcare, things like that. That's going to be a need. So I think Asheville, for a number of reasons, is only going to be a more exciting place to be. I don't see that slowing down.
Thank you.
Do you guys have a vision to like strategize a few moves ahead, into the future? You have maybe like a think tank among the executives and senior members, and you think, what's going to be the next move? It's like, what are we going to do? Maybe to stay competitive, or to, maybe you do SWOT analysis and all that, and then you get insights.
Yeah, so all of those things are really important, and we do a lot of those things. We have an advisory board that really helps us with a lot of that strategic thinking and business planning and things like that. I think that for us, the two things that are going to continue to be really important, we talked about Azure earlier. I think we're only just scratching the surface with what we can do with Microsoft Cloud, Azure 365. It's just incredible, and it's going to continue. That's going to continue to grow. Our expertise in putting, I'm working right now on, there's an application that is, it's a EHR type application, it's a medical application, and we actually, pretty proud of this, we figured out a way, there's no posted option And per the developer, the software, it's not you're not able to host it in a cloud environment. And we put it in the cloud. And we put it in Microsoft Azure. And I'm really, really excited about some of the potential for that and providing some of these medical practices that really, really use that. Because right now, if you use that application, you have to put it in one of your offices. If you've got multiple medical offices and you've got one office that's hosting that application, if that office goes down, all of a sudden, all of your other offices can't work. And that's a big problem. That's a single point of failure that can really negatively impact an organization. And so some of those projects I'm really, really excited about. I mentioned there's another application, really a developer group that's in Greensboro. And we're working closely with them on for some of their clients moving their application into Azure. So that's, to me, that's kind of one of the next steps for us. Security is another huge focus for electronic office and something that we have a lot of, that kind of some of our roots are in. And I think that's only going to become more important in terms of, not only as we build out these cloud systems, how do we think about protecting them, keeping them safe, keeping our clients compliant, those kind of challenges. Those two things are kind of going to go hand in hand. And so I would say that's the other piece to all this.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to do the future then. What does the future hold for you?
Okay, all right.
So this is the question I ask everybody that comes. How long till ChatGPT kills your business? Or do you care about it?
I don't know if ChatGPT, if I do my job right, ChatGPT will not kill our business. I will say that. Because part of my job is to keep us relevant. And again, I think that technology is only becoming more complicated. Our role may change, but there's still gonna be a need for technology services. There's still gonna be a need for technology. Only works as well as the people that are able to use it. And so, as long as we need to continue to help users use technology optimally, there's going to be a place for a company like Electronic Office. So, ChatGPT is really, really, really exciting. I don't subscribe to some of the fear mongering. That's maybe a little bit too strong a word, but I don't subscribe to some. Steve's giving me the big thumbs up. I don't subscribe to that. I think it's really exciting. Lots of questions about how we balance ChatGPT with human oversight and what that looks like. But I see only possibilities there, and something that we need to dive into and continue to understand more.
And then along those lines, so it was interesting tonight because I'm having you, and so I was telling everybody, it's like, look, I've got the CEO of an MSP coming. And they're like, yeah, but they're doing a meetup on AI, and they have pizza. So do you foresee a problem with your company not being cool enough? So I've been doing this long enough. I remember when MCSE and CCNA was actually sexy. People are like, oh, it's not that way anymore. And so, like, when you're looking for employees and all of that, are you concerned that you might be getting to the world where you're just not sexy enough for the cool employees?
I'm not really all that sexy. I don't know if we try and be sexy. I don't know if that's kind of what we go for. I mean, so it all depends on what you consider sexy. I mean, different strokes for different folks. So I mean, I think there are pieces of what we do that is really, really, really cool. I mean, we get to work with 80 some odd different organizations of different expertise, of different sophistication levels that do different things, and to be able to work with those organizations and have such an incredible impact on that kind of breadth of organization is, to me, that's really awesome. To be able to go into a business and not just talk about technology, but actually talk about their business and what makes their business tick and what makes their business interesting. I mean, to use your word, like that's kind of sexy.
But is that being sold to the next generation? Like the 18 and 19-year-olds, do you think they're looking at MSPs going, that's who I want to work for?
I don't know. To be determined. But you're gonna have. So we're not. So one of the things that I think we try and do is be really clear on like what we are and what we're not. So we're not developers. We're not out there trying to develop the next really cool app. We don't have our own cloud. We never were really interested in doing that. Why would I want to do something that Microsoft? Why would I want to go and compete against Microsoft again in something like that? But we have real impact on people's work lives, on organizations, and then that impact spreads out to their clients, their customers, that kind of thing. So, I guess part of that is there's always kind of that in vogue thing that everybody's attracted to. So like right now, a lot of that is security is huge, and people are going out and they just want to do security all day, and like that's great. I mean, we need more security talent in technology, but we also need more folks that actually help the technology work better. And so, is that sexy? I don't know, but what I know is that it's always evolving, and so for us, it's evolving with that, and then finding the right folks for our team that fit in that fit into that. I mean, does that? I don't know. I feel like I gave you a bunch of words, but didn't really say anything. But that's my way of saying like I'm not sure, but I'm not sure how much that matters. Like, what do y'all think? Does it?
The cool kids are overrated.
So with that then, so you have the tech stack now with Azure and Microsoft and all that. So we hear a lot about AR and VR and blockchain. Do you care, in the next decade, with spatial OS or whatever coming out, does any of that actually matter to you, or what is actually interesting to you that you think you're going to bring into your tech stack over the next 5 or 10 years?
So for me, it's the underlying technologies that are really, really, really exciting. So like blockchain, understanding what that means for things like digital contracts and things like that. That's kind of the exciting piece. I think that, and for us, again, a lot of what we do is at an infrastructure level. So making sure that we're develop's not the right word, but we're integrating and implementing the right infrastructure to support some of those new technologies. That's what we're going to be focused on. And so all of those trends, yes, we want to be keeping up with. And for us, it's really about kind of just on time. We don't want to be on the bleeding edge of certain technologies. We want to be bringing the right technologies to our clients on time when it makes sense to them. To your question about new technologies and whether it's us or the client who's kind of bringing those technologies, we want to be helping our clients implement those technologies when it's right for them, not because it's going to be really, really cool in 4 or 5 years. It's like let's do it on time. I think that's really, really important.
And then one of the questions then is, so like tech community, so an interesting thing being in this for so long is, again, I remember when MCSEs and Cisco were the cool kids. And like we actually had parties and we got together and drank beer and talked about replication strategies. I remember those days. So that is all now turned over to the coders and the developers and all of that. And that's one of the interesting things, like with this, I was talking with a couple of people again about bringing you in. And there's this feeling that MSPs and a lot of these old school technology people don't deal with the tech community anymore. Like the tech community has moved on and MSPs just haven't followed along. Do you find a value in the tech? Like you're here, but like you don't much come to meet the geeks, nor do any other MSPs. Like, is there a value?
I wish I came. Like, shout out to Meet the Geeks, please. Like, you guys should go. I have an 8-month-old at home, which makes it a little challenging. That's my excuse. What was my excuse before the baby was born? I don't know. I had some great excuse. But like, shout out. Like, actually, Electronic Office was one of the founders of when Meet the Geeks was getting going back in, I think, like 2008, 2007, 2008. So, I mean, that is an important organization.
But it's important, but it's like, I remember I had a buddy of mine, and I said, I support you. And then he started screaming at me, because he's like, I don't need your support, I need people to show up and sponsor it.
Yeah.
No. And so, like, an interesting thing, though, like you support Meet the Geeks, and I'm not trying to, but like, but is there actually a value to you in the tech community? Or are you so, almost like an electrician, like you're so just in business nowadays, the tech community is almost something else?
I mean, I think that's a negative way to look at it. Yes, I think that there's definitely a place for managed service providers. For managed service providers in the greater tech community, 100%. Now, I'm a managed service provider. Like, I'm biased. Like, but I think. Here's the thing. To your example, I think there are things that we do that are kind of like an electrician, but also what sets the really good managed service providers apart is the one that can go in and understand the business and work with the business and actually drive the business forward. So on that level, when you're able to operate at that level, which I think is a higher level than a lot of MSPs operate, then you're able to have a greater impact, and you are able to have sort of that seat at the table. But also, like, do developers look down on us? Like, probably, but that's kind of what developers do. I mean, I don't want to be too.
Well, no, but I'm also wondering, like, with like MSPs and such, is the community more like Chamber of Commerce or that type? Like, is it just are you in tech but no longer really of us or something? I don't know. I'm just because it is interesting. It's not just you. It's like you do like the infrastructure type people. Like, it's just curious. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, last year I wanted to give a talk to the chamber about securing businesses, and they turned me down, and they didn't ask me to come speak because I guess they didn't think I was, they didn't think I was important enough. So I don't know. Maybe the chamber doesn't think so.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, I understand why you think that, or why people. I shouldn't put that on you, but I understand why people think that. But again, I would push back on that and say that yes, we should be more involved. And I think so also, but it's also the onus is on the MSP to actually be involved and position ourselves as a partner in all of this. As I said, the software stack and the developers, I mean, that's where the magic happens. Let's not get that, mistaken that. That's where the magic happens. But if the network layer and the infrastructure layer aren't designed to support that, then the whole thing can be a house of cards. So really, we have to all work together. If users don't know how to use your application or can't effectively operate in that application, you can have the greatest application ever, but it's going to be worthless. And so I do think that there's a collaboration piece. I don't think it does anybody any favors to, to say, oh well, MSPs aren't the cool kids. But again, I'm an MSP, so I'm inherently biased. Yeah.
What departments do you have in your company? And
Hold on, we'll have questions in like 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry. That's my fault. I pointed to him. I saw a question. I was like, yeah.
Hold on, I don't want to have a whole insanity. Okay, I only got a couple more questions. So then, with all this, one question is there an exit for electronic office? So you have it now. Is your kid going to take it over? Are you going to sell it? Is there
Well,
IPO?
My mantra with family businesses is like you gotta want it. You should never do it out of a place of obligation. So tomorrow is promised to nobody. That's kind of what I always say. But we talked earlier about electronic office. We do look at ourselves as fiercely independent, and we operate our organization to remain independent as long as possible, and to operate from that position. So we're in it for the long game. We don't make decisions for short-term gain. We make our decisions with the long view, and that's how we approach things. So if somebody I also always say, everything is for sale. I mean, if somebody walked into the office and, offered me $1 gazillion, like, I would probably have to consider that. But that's not. We don't make decisions based on looking at that. We make our decisions based on remaining independent and operating as we have the last 42 years.
All right. And then got 2 more questions. So one, if you were 18 right now, so for your position and the most successful people you see within the MSP world, what should an 18-year-old think about doing? Should it be college, certifications? Like, is there a track do you think that they should be on that would be most valuable?
Is that for an 18-year-old that wants to own and run an MSP, or just an 18-year-old that wants to work in the tech space?
Well, like an 18-year-old that wants to work in, let's say, like the infrastructure, like the MSP space, whether or not they want to own the company or not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that. So I think that there's no substitute for investing in yourself and in that kind of education. There's no substitute for passion and desire to grow and expand your skills. The awesome thing about technology is that a lot of that can be done. So much of what can be done there is at our fingertips. One of the sharpest technology minds at our organization has a history degree. Like you can. But the beauty of that is that you can have other interests and you can grow your technology. Knowledge and experience and skills in ways other than just traditional education. And so, that's something that I think has always made technology a little bit different and unique. I mean, that's the reason why you had companies started in garages and that kind of thing. But I think that there's no substitute for education. There's no substitute for experience, getting our hands dirty. That desire to grow and expand our skills, and I would also say, like, for an 18-year-old, when I think about when I was 18, there was so much that I didn't know what I didn't know about what jobs were out there and what different careers would look like. And so I think sometimes people they get pigeonholed, or they go after one very specific thing without thinking about the bigger picture and what other jobs are out there. I mean, even now, 18-year-olds now, when they enter the job say they do a 4-year degree, they may be applying and looking at jobs that they never even knew existed as an 18-year-old. And so I think that's something that's important to keep in mind.
Fair enough. And so the final question for you, the promise, are you guys hiring? Like, what are you hiring for?
Yes, well, I'm always, I like to be in a constant state of hiring, and I think we're always looking for sharp folks. I mean, seriously, we are going through some growth right now, and so we're looking for a lot of different technical roles, different engineering roles, whether it be support desk, projects, those kind of roles. We're also definitely looking for kind of probably the number one thing we're looking for right now is an account advisor, somebody to work with our clients, work with a segment of our client base to help bring those kind of technologies to them, to help consult with them, and to be their advocate within electronic office. And so those are kind of the roles that we're looking for.
Cool. Any final thoughts then you want to give the folks?
No, this was really cool. This was really neat. I hope you guys learned something from this. Got something from this. If anybody wants to connect, I'm on LinkedIn. Eli has my email address, and always happy to connect. I'm pretty. You probably can tell this. Like I'm pretty passionate about Asheville and this community, and people who and helping expand opportunities for people who are here and want to be here and that kind of thing. I think that's something that's really, really cool.
Cool. Okay. Any final questions then? Or Alex, you had your question.
Yes. What departments do you have within your company, and how do you create different cross-functional teams for a project?
How do we create what?
How do you create different cross-functional teams for different projects? I understand it may be different, but maybe you can give me an overview, kind of rundown what it's usually like.
Yeah, so we have we do have different divisions in our organization. We have client services, which is sales, but also those kind of account advisors that work directly with our clients. We have support desk, a typical a knock level engineer. We also have a project team, which is responsible for implementing new technologies at our clients, just what it sounds like, projects. And then we also have a sysadmin team, which is all about, we didn't talk about much about our tech stack, but to run an MSP, to really do it well, it takes a fairly refined technology stack, a stack of tools. We're proud of our stack. And so, but those tools take care and feeding and optimizing and all those kind of things. And so that's our other team that really takes care of the tools that take care of our clients. So those are our and then we have, I didn't mention it, but we have a business services group too that keep the lights on, the bills paid, and all of those kind of things, which are very, very, very important. There are a lot of businesses that they forget that piece, and they can be bad situation.
Any more questions?
The company that I used to work with, they have they don't have just one single technology or vendor. They have multiple, and basically, how do how you work with other MSP together, basically as a partnership with just one or two company? Or?
Are you talking about like MSP working with other technology companies?
Yeah, MSP working with another MSP and with this company or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's you always are concerned about having too many cooks in the kitchen. You have to have good lines of delineation. One of the things that we really like and we work really well with is internal IT teams. So if we have a client that has an internal team, we will work to bolster that team. And our job in that case is really to make that we call it internal IT team look good. And so that's something that we do fairly well, and that we really like to sink our teeth into. But again, to do that well takes really good communication and good collaboration. And if you don't, you can have the best technology in the whole world, but if you don't get the communication right, then you're not going to be successful.
Well, there you go. So another fun night. Nice little fireside chat. Oh, one thing about it, my knees hurt with this for some reason.
Well, I just have one comment. It's an edification for you. Kemper and I have been friends, partners, and colleagues for over 8 years. There hasn't been a year that's gone by that we haven't conferred over Meet the Geeks. He's been at many of the Meet the Geeks. But Kemper was the first person who signed the
buy-in for the IT boot camp that we were developing. So Kemper was the first organization that responded favorably, saying, yes, we support the idea and the concept of the IT boot camp, which was built by Meet the Geeks, which is a member of the technology community.
He's Steve's being kind. He's been a long time friend. I'm gonna think more about that. Some of your questions, what's kind of fun about this is maybe you think about things in new and different ways, and it's funny because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether we're the cool kids, which is not exactly what you said.
Yeah, close enough.
But I mean, it does. It doesn't have to be. I mean, the cool thing about technology is that there's a lot of different seats at the table, and it all has to interact and work well together for it to be successful. And so it's funny, we laugh about the AI people up and yeah, that gets all the headlines and all that stuff, and it's really cool stuff. It's really going to be important, and it's going to be transformative for a lot of organizations. But that doesn't mean that the other stuff either gets forgotten or can get forgotten. So it's interesting. I mean, I was laughing with Steve and Dan before this about kind of the trends and the things that come and go. And whenever I think about new technologies, I always laugh about 3D TVs. And 30 years ago, there was never going to be another 2D TV. And then 10, 15 years ago, there was never going to be another 2D TV. And now, I don't think you could buy a 3D TV except on eBay, maybe. So it's kind of funny how these and as you do this longer and longer, you kind of get to see and laugh at some of these trends and the things that come in and out of popularity. Not that I think that AI is somehow going to be popular and then go away. It's just those kind of terms and those kind of things. It all evolves in terms of what it means and what it can do and all that kind of stuff. So it's important, but it doesn't mean it's the only thing. And I think as I sit here and I'm thinking about this, I also think don't feel like you have to pigeonhole yourself into one specific area. Don't feel like, oh man, I gotta do AI, or I'm not gonna be. There's not gonna be a place for me, or I'm not gonna have opportunities. Find out what you like. Find out what you're passionate at. Find out what you're good at, and there's gonna be places for that. So
Cool. Okay, everybody, we've got lots and lots of cookies back there. And
nice. Thank God. This was a lot of fun.
just push the
Just push the button. There's 2 buttons. Push the button.
The one with the circle and the line through it, I believe that's called a power button.
I can't see that.
Good times.
Is that good? Yeah. impressed me all that. Oh, that was awesome.